Hey, this is Wilson Newell, and I'll be doing my first homily of the semester. It's called We Are Family. Family. I wonder what comes to mind when you hear that word. Recently, my family and I were at a Mardi Gras parade in New Orleans, and it's a parade we go to every single year. And we have a lot of laughs out there, and we make a lot of memories. It's kind of an all-day thing, and it's a family reunion where all people from our family get together for it, and it's just so much fun. But every year, without fail, somebody gets in an argument with someone else about something that is completely silly and insignificant. This year, it was because someone brought an extra ham to the parade that they had not communicated about bringing, and so we had extra food, but because nobody told anybody about it, it became this huge ordeal. Mary Carr says that, "I think a dysfunctional family is any family with more than one person in it." Yeah, I think we can all relate to that in our own experience. Jesus in John chapter 13 said, "Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this will all people know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." And Francis Chan points out with this that the world and people should look at the relationships of people in the church, and they should say, "Wow, I want to know that kind of love in my own relationships, in my own family," and be drawn to the love of God through that. And sadly, I'm not sure that that's the case most of the time today. I think they see a lot of the brokenness, a lot of the same dysfunction in our churches that they are familiar with in the world around them. So how can we change this narrative? How can we have a family dynamic that not only blesses us, that helps us to thrive in this world that God has created, but to also be a blessing to the world around us? I think we can understand that family is central to God's story because He loves to bring beauty out of dysfunction. In fact, the story of God begins with a perfect family relationship with the Trinity. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the deep. We know that Jesus was there as well, because it says that through the Word, all things were made in John chapter 1. And so we have this picture of the Trinity dwelling together in perfect relationship for all time, for all eternity. I couldn't imagine being in relationship with two other people for all eternity. It would just not go well. But the story of God also ends in this perfect relationship too, not only with the Trinity, but with the entire family of God. And so we see the church coming together with Christ in this beautiful wedding at the end of the age. And we are just united with Him in love and worship for all time. There's a lot of things about family in between the book of Genesis and Revelation as well. Especially with the book of Genesis. It's all about different families and how dysfunctional they are, from Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel to ending with the story of Joseph and his brothers who sold him into slavery. But out of all of those things, good news and restoration can happen because in the case of Joseph with his brothers, he offers them forgiveness and mends this broken family. We should also understand that families should survive probably more than function, but they should function with mutual submission, even in crisis. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, Paul writes, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." And then he goes on to unpack these different roles within the family. Wives should submit to their husbands. Husbands should love their wives by laying their lives down for them like Christ did for the church, by submitting to them. Says that children should obey their parents. They should honor them. That should be how they submit to them. But that parents should also submit to their children in some ways by not exasperating them. It all points back to that idea of mutual submission, to laying down our wills for one another, humbling ourselves and treating each other with respect. In Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 39, Jesus gives us a perfect example of this. And then Jesus went with His disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and He said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with Him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." And so here we see Jesus, almost in his broken humanity, crying out for mercy from God. We see his desires, his own will that is not exactly in line with the plan of the Father, but because he loves his Father, and because he loves you and me, he lays down his will for his family. He puts himself aside so that others can be blessed. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could do that in our own families? If when things get out of hand and we're in crisis mode, we could just set our own agendas aside and say, what's good for our family? We can take up our cross and submit to one another humbly out of love. My dad and I got along really, really well when I was growing up and rarely ever fought. But one time we got into it pretty bad because I wanted to quit football my senior year. But my dad had quit his senior year and did not want me to repeat his mistake. And so he and I fought about this for a while. But eventually I came to the realization, my dad has done so much for me. He's given so much. And I can tell this is really, really important to him. And so I decided to play. And it wasn't the most fun time of my life, and there was still some, sadness in that season because I was doing something I didn't want to do. But God worked through that. In fact, he helped our team and some of my friends and I to really change the culture of that football program from one of hazing and bullying to one of really a team. And so my hope for us is that we will experience this kind of love in our family relationships, that we will submit to one another humbly out of love. And what a witness for the world it would be. What if the world could see that? I believe that they would be drawn to Christ in a new way. Amen.